Hey, thanks for stopping by. Robert Kofed with Computer Creations. This video is sponsored by Haotian laser, and today we're going to show you how to set up your rotary on your Galvo laser. And whether it's a CO2 Galvo, fiber laser, UV laser, this process works on just about any Galvo laser. And so what we thought we'd do is we would keep this at a fairly high level, keep it simple, give you a great foundation for getting started on a rotary on a Galvo laser. The things that I'm gonna have today in my project is I've got a 12-ounce koozie here. I'm gonna need a little bit of blue painter's tape. We're gonna need an engineering square that's got a flat bottom on it. Of course, your rotary. Again, we're gonna keep with a fairly basic rotary, but the process that I show you today will work on any chuck style rotary with the manufacturer of your choice. So keep that in mind. And we're gonna need a black Sharpie. And other than that, the other thing that we're gonna need that I have been finding invaluable when it comes to a Galvo machine is a Wixie digital angle gauge. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this to set our level, or actually what we're gonna do is we're gonna match the level of the head with the level on the tumbler to make sure they are on the same plane, because it's a lot more critical from a focus perspective than it is on a gantry machine. And so what I found is this provides excellent results, and I'll list this in my in the description of the video. They're not expensive, but they sure provide a much better and a lot more accurate registration. And that way the plane of your Galvo head here will be the same as the plane of your tumbler. And you'll get a lot better results that way. So those are the things that we're gonna need. And so step one will be that we're gonna go ahead and put blue painter's tape on this koozie. We're gonna take this engineering square, we're gonna put the koozie down, we're going to take our marker, we're going to make our mark, and what that does is this mark now provides, we know that this mark is perpendicular to the bottom and the top. So when we engrave this logo, we know it's not going to be canted in any way. And so this straight line that we put on our tumbler, we're going to put it in the chuck, and then we're going to actually generate a line in LightBurn and superimpose it on the tumbler, and that's going to be our guide in order to adjust the rotary to make sure that this line and the line that the laser is throwing are the same. And so step one, we're going to want to put the tape on, we're going to want to mark the line. The other thing that we're going to want to make sure that we have is grab our diameter, because we're going to need that for LightBurn later. So we're going to need the diameter of what you're engraving. The other thing that we're going to need is the distance of the engraving area. Now, this is not required. This is optional, but I find that if you take this measurement here and you build it into LightBurn, your logo will fit exactly right in the middle. There's really no guesswork to it. So diameter, height of the engraving area, mark our parallel part, and we'll go ahead and set it in the laser, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all lined up. We've jumped into LightBurn now, and the first thing that we're going to do is I'm on my 15 watt UV 210 lens profile, and the first thing that we're going to do, we don't necessarily need to be connected to the rotary just yet. We don't need to be connected to the laser just yet. And one thing that I want to be clear about is don't plug in your rotary as of yet, because when we align our rotary, we're going to want it unplugged from the laser, because you want it to be able to where you can rotate that rotary around. And a lot of the newer rotaries, when you plug that rotary in to the tower of the laser, it locks it up to where it's very hard for you to physically turn it, and it's not good form when you do that. So just keep the rotary unplugged from the laser at this time. We're going to go ahead and draw a line. So I'm going to come to my pencil tool. We're just going to come down here, left mouse click, pull it out. I'm going to hold the shift key down to make sure I can The shift key gives you either 45-degree angles, horizontal or vertical lines. And I'm just going to pull out, I'm going to left mouse click again, then I'm going to right mouse click to disconnect. And now we've got a line. The next thing I'm going to do is this line could be placed anywhere. It really doesn't matter where it is. What I want to do is I want to make sure that this line is directly in the middle of this design grid. And you'll see why here in a minute. So in order to center something on your grid, if you hit the letter P, the P key on your keyboard, it's going to center that. So like if I select my logo and I hit the letter P, it's going to put it right in the middle. And so what we're doing is we're going to generate this line that's going to be shown on the laser, and we'll use this line and line it up with the black line that we put on that blue painter's tape. And that's how we're going to align the rotary to make sure that this axis and the axis of the rotary are the same. They're congruent. So just to give you a little bit of information, this is the front of the machine. The rotary motor is over here. I'm standing over here to the left side of the machine. And so we are going around the X. So you can see right here, this little X indicates that this direction is the X direction. That direction up and down is the Y direction. And so that's how we've got this thing laid out. So what we'll do next is we'll turn the laser on and we'll connect our LightBurn to our laser. And we can do up a few minor things on our setup. And then once we've got that done, we will go ahead and frame it. And that will project this line that we've drawn. And we'll get our rotary dialed in. So next we're going to go ahead and connect the laser to LightBurn. Get a few things set up. And we'll get our rotary aligned. Okay, we've got our LightBurn connected to our laser. You can see that we're standing in ready status here. We're going to go up here to our rotary setup tool and we're going to click on that. We're going to make sure that we've selected chuck type rotary. We're going to flip the enable rotary switch on. This reverse rotary direction, usually it's off. It normally is off. Go ahead and do a test engrave, and if your engrave is mirrored, then you'll need to turn this on, but leave it off initially until you prove that it needs to be turned on. If it's mirrored, just turn this on and that will fix that problem. Return to starting point is just exactly what it says. When it's done, it's going to come back to where it starts. We'll talk about these split size setups here in just a little bit. This is where you've got to decide, depending on which way you've got your axis and your rotary placed on your laser, you will tell it, are you going around the X or are you going around the Y? And because the way we've got ours set, in other words, the tumbler is spinning around the X direction, we want to make sure that that's selected. And then all of these I typically leave alone. Leave them with their defaults, and until you understand what they do, that's what I would highly recommend you do. And we've got our steps per rotation at 12,800. These are all manufacturer specific, so you'll need to get this number from your manufacturer and put it in here. We measured our diameter of our tumbler and it was 3 inches. That automatically calculated our circumference at 9.42. And at this point, all of this is set up and ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and say OK. Next, we're going to go ahead and just select this line, make sure it's selected, and hit frame. And what that will do is that will superimpose this line out on the laser bed, and we'll go ahead and stick our rotary and our tumbler underneath it and align this line that's being projected by the laser with the black line that you put on the blue painter's tape on the tumbler. And that's how we're going to make sure that this axis is the same as the axis on your rotary. So we'll go ahead and go over to the laser and I'll show you how to do that next. Okay, the first thing, we've just got our tumbler in our rotary. This is loose, as you can see, it's disconnected from the laser. And the reason why we want it disconnected is because I want to be able to freely move this to make sure that this line is right at the very top of this axis. And so the first thing we're going to want to do is I'll go ahead and turn on the laser, and I'll get a single red dot. And I typically want to put that red dot somewhere in the middle of where your engraving area is going to be. And once we do that, then we'll go ahead and project this line and make sure that this the projected line lines up with the line on this koozie. So I'm going to turn on the laser now. And what we're going to do is we're going to back this up till we get this red light. Remember, this red dot is illustrating the dead middle of your workspace. And so when you hit the P key on in LightBurn, it basically is going to put your design right here in the middle. And so we're there, we're roughly there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select the straight line and hit frame, and you're going to see this line show up. And so there you go. You should be able to see that line now. And so all we've got to do is just basically, all I'm doing is just making sure that this black line is in line with this projected red line. And that way I know when this spins, it's not going to be canted in any way. And so the bottom line is we're going to get that all lined up. The black line is lined up. It's at the very top or the apex of the turn. And at this point, we'd want to go ahead and secure our rotary. Now, this rotary doesn't have a lot of adjustment, vertical and horizontal slots, so I'm going to have to hold it down a different way. But a lot of the newer rotaries have the horizontal and vertical alignment slots, and doing this should not be a problem. But this is how you basically make sure that the axis of your rotary is lined up with the axis in LightBurn. And so I'll go ahead and secure this, and the next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and level this tumbler. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and focus our, we're going to level our tumbler. And so this is a little bit different than the way we level our tumblers in a gantry machine. Normally we use, some kind of a simple level, and that's fine. What I found, depending on what you're engraving, but especially with glass, levelness or parallel, having your tumbler parallel to your head of your Galvo is pretty critical. And so what's worked well for me is one of these Wixie digital angle gauges. And so what I normally do to level my tumbler is, because my axis is going this way in the X direction, I'm going to put my angle gauge up here, and you can see that it says 0, 0. And so what I want to do is whatever that reading is this way on your angle gauge is what I want it to read down here. So they are at the same plane. It doesn't matter what your base plate is at. It matters what your Galvo head is at. And so put your digital, you can actually zero it out if you want, that's fine. Mine's right on the money, which is great. So I'm going to go 0 here, and then what you're going to do is put this on here, and then depending on the type of rotary that you have, you will loosen it up to where you can move this head up and down until you can zero this angle gauge out. And once you zero this angle gauge out like it is now, you know that this plane is the same as this plane, and you'll get a nice even engrave across your tumbler. If you find that you're doing engraving on tumblers and part of it's getting lighter or fading away, chances are it's because either you're using a level like this and it's just not accurate enough, or there's something that's not quite right from a level perspective. And so the best way to do it, zero it out here, if that's what it is here, and you're good to go. And so next we're going to go ahead and focus it. So I've got a predetermined focus stick here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this underneath it. And it looks like I need to drop my raise my laser head just a little bit. So I'll turn this machine back on. It's going to get a little bit noisy, so I can move the laser head up, and we will have focused this. And then this is ready to go. Then we'll jump back into LightBurn and do our last minute things that we need to do in LightBurn. And before you know it, we're going to get this tumbler burn. So that's how you level a tumbler on a Galvo laser. Okay, I've turned the unit back on. I'm going to go ahead and just raise my Galvo head just ever so slightly. And that's perfect right there. So if you're interested on how I generated this focus stick, I just looked at the lines on the side of the head where the focus has been determined. I measured the distance from the bottom of this line, from the bottom of this lens to that line, and subtracted it and made myself a focal stick in LightBurn. And so not hard to do, works out real well, and it's easy to do, and it's quick and easy. All of my lines are on the opposite side, so this was a good solution for me. So at this point, we're aligned, we're focused, we're ready to go on this end, and so we're going to jump back into LightBurn and finish up our little design and go ahead and get this engraved and see what it looks like. Okay, you can see we're still connected. I've drug my logo over here, and you'll notice now we've got a black rectangle in here. And that black rectangle, remember I indicated to you we wanted to put in here the kind of the height of the engraving area. And so I did that. This is 3 inches by 3.9. 3.9 inches is the engraving height, the total engraving height. And then what I did is I superimposed this square on the tumbler and moved it up or down to make sure it fit the engraving area perfect. And then I just centered my logo to this square. And then I know that that's exactly where it's going to be. And so I verified that this design is in the middle of our engraving area. And so if I select this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the other video here. Hold on a second. That started. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my design and hit frame. And you will notice there's 3 different options here. Bounds shows you just basically a rectangle on what it's showing here. Basically, it's giving you that rectangle that you see on that cup. That's where it's projecting on how much of the cup it's going to take up. And it's a kind of a good way to judge on how big your graphic needs to be. The hull is basically just a more refined general outline of what you're going to get. And then contour is actually the actual design flashed around. And so this is one thing I absolutely love about Galvo machines is you can see exactly where this design is going to go on anything that you're putting it on. And so it just depends on which one of these you need to use. They've got some more options here. Right now we'll just leave it to contour. I kind of like it flashing around like that. And then at this point we could go ahead and hit start, but we've got to put our settings in. And so I'm going to go ahead and close that. That'll stop the preview. I'm going to jump in here and verify my settings. And we're going to go 200 millimeters a second at 40 frequency, pulse width of 2, line interval of 2, and we'll see how this does. I haven't engraved many navy blue items yet, so we'll see how she turns out. I'm going to go ahead and get set up and make sure that all my air's on and that I've got my safety glasses on, and we'll see what this looks like. One other thing that I wanted to talk to you about that's important is this split setup size. So usually what I've found works best, if I go back to my settings and you notice that I have a 0.02 line interval is what my line interval is. And typically I split that in half. Now this is somewhat subjective. It just depends on what you're engraving, depends on what these settings need to be. So with my line interval being 0.02, I'm going to come up here to the split size, and you notice I have it half, or 0.01, and I don't have any overlap. Typically the quality of chucks that we have today, normally you're not going to need overlap, but you can read in the LightBurn documentation on what split size does and what overlap does. There's a million different ways you can set this up, again, depending on what you're trying to do. And we're not going to get into that kind of detail in this particular video. So typically just start with half of what your line interval is and you'll be in pretty good shape. And again, this, you know, you can play around with this and get it dialed in. It's just like any other setting on your laser, whether it's your speed and frequency settings. This is another setting that you'll want to play with when you're using your rotary. So at this point, we've got our steps right. I'll show you how to test it to make sure. We'll do that next. That'll verify kind of where we're at, what's going on. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to verify your rotary settings for your steps per rotation. And then at that point, I think we're ready to go and get this tumbler done. So if you want to use the test feature in LightBurn to confirm that these steps per rotation are correct, you can hit this test button. Now this is after you've got it all set up, it's been focused, it's been leveled. You've got a mark on the top so you know where it's supposed to come back to. As you can see, I've left the tape on that tumbler, and what we're going to do is we're going to hit this test button, and when I hit this test button, it should make one full revolution. And so I've hit the test button, it's going around, it stopped, and then it will return. We'll do that one more time. I'm going to hit the test button, and it should pretty much come right back to where it was before. And that way you know that your steps per rotation are right on the money. So we've focused it, we've leveled it, we've confirmed that our steps per rotation are correct. We've got our split size half the size of our LPI. And I think we're ready to go. We've got this selected here, our graphic. We're going to say frame, and then we're going to say start. And then it's going to want you to say start one more time. While we're waiting for this tumbler to engrave, we might as well go over the steps that we've done. So the first thing we did, we put a piece of blue painter's tape on our koozie, and we took a engineer square that's got a flat bottom on it, and we marked a vertical line, and that gave us our alignment line. We put that koozie in our chuck rotary. We laid it on our laser bed. We went into LightBurn. We selected our lens profile. We drew a horizontal line. We hit the P key on the keyboard to center that line. We then turned on the laser, made sure that LightBurn and the laser were talking to each other. We framed that line, so it superimposed that line on the laser bed. And at that point, we aligned the koozie black line that we made with the Sharpie with the red line that the laser was generating, and that put the axis on the rotary in the same line with the axis in LightBurn. And that way, that ensures when you engrave your logo that it's not going to be canted one way or the other. So that's a pretty important process to do. Once we did that, we put a Wixie digital level gauge on the top of our Galvo head, and we recorded that. Mine was 0, 0. We took the Wixie gauge down, and then we leveled our tumbler to match whatever our Galvo head measurement was. So that was 0, 0. At that point, we focused to make sure that our focus was set properly. We went back into LightBurn. We dropped in our graphic, my logo here, and we generated a little rectangle that shows basically the engraving area of that koozie, and we centered our graphic on that. We superimposed that rectangle on the koozie and made sure that was lined up. And the good thing about that is that way you ensure that when you engrave your logo, it's going to be exactly in the middle of where you want it to be. And we verified our steps per rotation. We put in our settings. And at this point, we're just about done with our engraving. It's not perfect. I'm still tweaking with settings on this UV. So full disclosure, you know, I've done a ton of rotary work, but still trying to get my settings for different things. But you get the idea.